The rumor of war grew behind them. Now they could hear, borne over the dark, the sound of harsh singing. They had climbed up far into the deeping coombe, and then they looked back. Then they saw torches, countless points of fiery lights on the black field behind, scattered like red flowers, or winding up from the lowlands in long, flickering lines. The Lord of the Rings Online, or LOTRO, is an MMORPG released in 2007 and remains, in my humble opinion, one of the best adaptations of Tolkien's world. In this video, I'll try to show you the hidden or not so hidden details that make the world of LOTRO so immersive and lively. With this video, we will dive into LOTRO's 5th expansion, Helm's Deep. It was released after the smaller content update of Wildermoor on 20th of November 2013. It continued the story all the way until the end of the Battle of Helm's Deep. The battle was given shape in the form of epic battles, which are large level scaling instances where your group completes sub-objectives in order to win the battle. The spectacle of these battles was rather grand, as the developers had to create a technique to show the huge armies of Uruk-hai without completely boiling your computer. The gameplay itself was a bit more controversial in its quality though, and these days you can play a story version of the battles, which I have done to film this video. I will include the flooding of Isengard as well, which was added in update 13, 5 months after the release of Helm's Deep. In this video, we will complete the entire Two Towers book apart from the chapters concerning Frodo and Sam. And, just like with previous expansions, the next video will cover other interesting details of this expansion outside of the main path of the members of the Fellowship of the Ring. In the last video, we left Aragorn, Gimli, Legolas and Gandalf as they crossed the Entwash into West Rohan. They travelled on horseback in a pretty straight line towards Edoras. They ride for almost an entire day with only a few hours of rest. As they approach the capital of Rohan at dawn, they see the sunlight shine from back over the Emimuil into the tips of the Eret Nimreis, or White Mountains. They cross the river Snowborn through a ford, which is present in the game, and ride towards the gates of Edoras. Before they enter the city, they pass through the barrow fields. These mounds line the road to the gate, a line of 7 mounds on the left and 9 mounds on the right. These mounds represent the 2 lines of kings who ruled over Rohan, and in-game the names of the kings are written on the mounds in Rohirric, which uses Anglo-Saxon script. The first line begins with Eorl the Young, who was buried together with his horse Feralof, first of the Mearas, and the line goes all the way to Helm the Hammerhand, who survived his sons and perished during the Great Winter. The fortress of Helm's Deep gets its name from this king. The second line goes from Helm's nephew Frealaf Hildesunu until Thengel the Thrice Renowned. This line will be extended after the war with the grave of King Theoden. Eomer's may spawn a 3rd row of mounds in the 4th Age, but it is not clear. Theoden's son is not buried here. His grave still stands guard over the ford of the Isen. On the graves in the barrow fields grow white flowers called Cymbalmine, which translates as Evermind. They are based on wood anemones. I will link a forum thread in the description where a player translated all the names on the mounds, from which I am very thankful. Next, the riders enter the capital of Rohan, Edoras, which translates as the courts in the speech of the Mark. From the outside, Legolas describes the city as a green hill encircled by a dike and a mighty wall with a thorny fence. Within this ring he describes the roofs of houses, with a great hall of men in the middle, thatched with gold. Its light shines far over the land, and the posts of its doors, too, are made of gold. When the dark gates opened, the four riders followed their guide up a stone pathway interspersed with small steps. Most of the houses they passed were wooden, and all doors were shut. Next to the path, a stream started to flow. When they reached the green terrace, they saw the stream originated from a spring flowing out of a statue shaped like a horse's head. The water fell into a basin, which fed the stream as it led through the city. Up the next set of stairs they encountered two guards seated on stone seats on each side of the steps, with suns blazed on their shields. These were the door wardens of the king. One of them, Hama, demanded the visitors leave their weapons, which they did after some grumbling from Aragorn on leaving his prized Anduril in the care of strangers. When this was done, and Gandalf managed to keep his staff, the visitors entered the Golden Hall of Meduseld. I hope it is clear from the footage how accurately all these details were incorporated into Edoras. But this is not all, for the inside of Meduseld is even more impressive. The four strangers enter the Golden Hall. It is described as a long, wide hall filled with shadows and high posts holding up the ceiling. The windows on the east side let in beams of light. The floor was made of stones in many hues, with devices and runes inlaid, and the pillars were gilded with many colored stones. Several tapestries hang upon the wall, and the four strangers notice one in particular. It shows a yellow-haired Eorl the Young upon his white horse Veralof, blowing his horn while rushing through the foaming water of the Celebrant, on his way to aid Steward Girion of Gondor in an act that would earn him the lands that he would later come to govern. They walk onto the golden seat of King Theoden, who sits slumped on his throne, wearing a white diamond upon his forehead. The confrontation between Gandalf and Grimo Wormtongue takes place, which is witnessed by the player in-game, and ultimately Gandalf manages to lift the clouds from Theoden's eyes, and he sees the light again. The Golden Hall is one of the most impressive buildings in the game, in my opinion. Thanks to some knowledgeable players, I have linked this forum thread in the description, many of the details in this building have been translated. There are many tapestries in the hall which portray important events in the history of Rohan. You can read most of these stories in the appendices of The Return of the King. I will cover them now, as it shows the strong backbone of the land, and why its people are eager to defend it. Here King Helm is shown striking the Dunlanding man Freka, who wished to marry his son to Helm's daughter. Helm refused, and the men insulted each other as they went into an argument. Outside they fought, and Helm slew the man with a single punch, thus earning the name Hammerhand. Here, Aldor the Old, the third king of Rohan, is depicted. He drives out the last of the Dunlandings from Calenarthon. Frealaf, the successor to Helm Hammerhand, slays Freka's son Wulf after Helm and his son died during the long winter, thus reclaiming Edoras and ending the Dunlandings' invasion of Rohan in 2758 of the Third Age. This is the tapestry noticed by the four strangers, depicting the first king of Rohan charging towards the Easterling army at the Battle of the Celebrant. The two elder brothers of Prince Vengel, Folkred and Vastred, perish in combat with the Haradrim after answering the summons of Gondor through a red arrow. They are buried together as twins in a mound in South Gondor called Hauth in Guanu, or Mound of the Brothers. The 11th king of Rohan, Brita Leofa, the Beloved, is fighting orcs fleeing from the Battle of Azanul Bizar, the battle where Thorin earns his nickname Oakenshield. Brita would later be slain by some of these orcs. The Hunter King Volka promised to hunt no animal as long as orcs roamed his lands. After the last orc was killed, the hunter hunted the great boar of Everhold and died together with his quarry. Saruman the White is given the keys to Orthanc on good faith by Beren, a steward of Gondor, after King Frealaf had slain Wolf and reclaimed Rohan from the Dunlendings. In the hall, all the banners of the towns are also represented, which, as I showed in the intro of the second East Rohan video, loosely correspond with the lines of the lament for the Rohirrim, which Aragorn recites as the four strangers pass through the battlefields. The lines of this poem are laid into the floor of the Golden Hall in black runes. A translation is shown on screen. I hope all of this gets across just how majestic of a rendition LOTRO has made of the Golden Hall. This building is an absolute masterpiece. Theoden steps out into the sunlight after Gandalf silences his advisor. He takes the sword of Eomer, who is freed from his prison by Hama, the door guard, and strength returns to the hand of the king. Grima is sent away with a horse to go and rot with his master. Gandalf advises King Theoden to take his people to Dunharrow, where they may defend themselves from Saruman's army. Meanwhile, a force should be gathered to destroy the danger Saruman poses for good. However, Theoden wishes to go to war himself, and appoints Éowyn to lead the people to Dunharrow on Hama's suggestion. In-game, all of this happens outside of Meduseld, whereas in the books Gandalf advises the king during a meal taken after Grima is sent away. The king gathers his forces and sets off towards Isengard, leaving an empty Edoras behind. However, on the road they encounter scattered soldiers, who relay the news that the Fort of the Isen has completely fallen, and the defenders under the banner of Erkenbrand are scattered. This leads Gandalf to nearly command Theoden to go to the fortress of Helm's Deep and defend themselves there, while he sets off in haste. They retreat towards Helm's Deep while being followed by a huge army of Uruk-hai. At the mouth of the valley where Helm's Deep is located, a great earthen wall with a gate in the middle protects the fortress. A mile wide, it stood a quarter-mile in front of the fortress and acted as the first defense. This wall is called the Helm's Dyke. The Hornburg itself was so called because of a great horn, which would strike fear in the enemy when sounded, was present inside. It stood upon a rock, and the deeping wall struck out from it to the other side of the valley. The wall was 20 foot high, wide enough for 4 men to walk abreast. Through the wall, a small stream flowed out through a culvert. At the rear, 3 staircases allow for escape into the glittering caves behind, or through a back door into the Hornburg. All was set up for battle. The women were stalled into the glittering caves together with the children too young to fight. The others took up arms and waited. There was nothing to do but waiting, and everyone waited until they were no longer. Suddenly, screams were heard from the dike. In-game, the fighting at the dike is joined by the player character. You defend the wall together with Gamling, an older soldier who led the soldiers stationed at the dike. Many arrows and bolts are shot at the enemy, but through the use of a fire-breathing war machine and sheer force of numbers, they overtake the wall. In the books, all the characters see is flaming brands scattering around the gate, forcing the defenders to retreat. They manage to slay many with bow and arrow, especially torch-bearers. but were severely outnumbered. The Uruk-hai now flood into the Deeping Cone. Legolas starts getting a lead on Gimli by firing arrows at the swarm below, along with the other defenders. Meanwhile, Uruks were grouping up at the gate and trying to ram it down. Aragorn and Eomer use a postern door, which was angled away from the gate so it would not be visible from the outside. From it, a small road leads to the gate, which Aragorn and Eomer use to ambush the attackers. This attack won the defenders some time to repair the gate, although it nearly costs Eomer his life, as he is tripped up by an Uruk-hai when retreating. He is saved by Gimli, who secretly joined their adventure since there was no axe work on the Deeping Wall yet. This would soon come after grappling hooks and ladders were thrown against the wall. Now, soldiers grabbed their melee weapons and deterred the assailants valiantly, when a sudden flash put an end to their honorable defense. The Uruk-hai had secretly crept into the portcullis, which allowed a water stream to exit the fortress, and planted explosive, which, for the first time in history of the fortress, created a breach in the Deeping Wall. Now they were pouring through, and the defenders were pushed back into the Hornburg. Some got cut off and had nowhere else to go but the glittering caves. Among these was Gimli, son of Glóin. While the circumstances that brought him there were terrible, this moment would leave a permanent mark on the dwarf. He later describes the caverns vividly to Legolas, and in the Fourth Age he would found a dwarf colony within them. While the book does not note exactly what happens in the caverns, Gimli emerges from it with a small head wound. In the game, this is attributed to a confrontation with some Dunlendings who sneak into the cave. They are significant in the non-canon player character story. The cave is very beautiful in-game, and the reflections and twinkling of the water closely reflect Gimli's description. Back in the Hornburg, the situation is becoming dire, and Theoden decides to meet his doom head-on. The door guard Hama will perish at the gates, buying valuable time for the king and his men to get ready. In the book, Aragorn gives a taunting speech at the Uruks who gather at the gate, but this is not shown in-game. The king then charges at the horde at dawn, only to find Gandalf has arrived, with the gathered army of Erkenbrand. Together, under the loud boom of the horn of Hammerhand, they chase the Uruk horde into a mysterious forest that has appeared beyond the Helm's Dike, from which none are seen again. Merry and Pippin had met Treebeard at the Bald Hill inside of Fangorn Forest, just before the three hunters came to search for them. Treebeard had taken them to one of his homes in the forest, Wellinghall. It is described as a shallow bay cut out of a wall at the root of the last mountain, which is probably the Methedras. It lay at the end of two aisles of trees like a great hall. A spring trickled down the wall over the entrance like a silver curtain, was collected in a basin and flowed off again into the forest. Inside it was a great table, but no seats. In the book, Treebeard sets two great vessels seemingly filled with water on the table and causes them to emit a green and golden light. In-game, these vessels are left on the altar to the side, but do give off some light. A great bed is present to the side, but Treebeard does not use it in this instance. The hobbits are given some end draft, and convince Treebeard to call for an Entmoot. This Entmoot was held at a place called Durndingle in the Tongue of Men. It is a deep bowl rimmed with a hedge of thick dark trees and can only be entered through 3 narrow passages through the trees. Inside it is grass-clad, and there are no trees except the slender silver birches at the middle of the bowl. The Ents begin their meeting with their slow murmuring in their own language. Then the Ent Bregalad, or Quickbeam, is brought to them. He has already made up his mind, so he takes them to his end house, which was nothing more than a mossy stone under a bank with a little spring bubbling from it. There they spend 3 days in the books before the End Mood comes to collect them to march to Isengard. In-game, the End Mood is made very short, but you can find Quickbeam's house inside of the forest if you explore it for yourself. It looks much as described and is very lovely. On the 3rd day, the hobbits march with Treebeard, and while they walk, they see the forest move towards Isengard. At the falling of night, they look down into Nan Curunir, the Wizard's Vale. Night lies on Isengard. Thus, the Battle of Helm's Deep was ended. In this game, the battle is played through several instances, and the player can switch through the fortress's states through changing the time of day. The last option, Sunrise, presents the fortress as it is directly after the battle. Gimli and Legolas reunite and conclude Gimli has won their contest with 1 point. Legolas is simply glad to see him with just a head wound. Some Dunlandings have surrendered and are put to work to undo the damage they have done. Later, the corpses of Rohirric's soldiers will be buried in 2 grave mounds, with the Dunlandings in a separate grave. The Uruk bodies will be buried during the night by the mysterious trees, in a hill later called the Death Down. Hama would be buried alone in a grave near the Hornburg for his bravery. This work is not shown in-game, as the members of the Fellowship go towards Isengard with Eomer and Theoden. They walk through the mysterious forest. Legolas sees eyes among the trees, and amid Gimli's protests, stops to walk deeper into the forest. Gandalf tells him to halt, at which moment 3 Ents appear and walk towards Isengard, completely ignoring the company. At this moment, Theoden begins to understand what has happened. An ancient ally, always laying right at his doorstep, stood up to the occasion. They move on to the Ford of the Isen. A mound has risen there, which was made on Gandalf's instructions by some of the soldiers he rounded up in the area. It is described as stone-ringed, and many spears are planted upon it, just like in the game. Upon finishing the mound, the soldiers went to Edoras to protect it from any attacks. In the book, the company passes by the ford while it is dry. The water starts running during the night when a group of Huorns, trees with a lower level of consciousness, pass them by. This event is not recorded in-game. They pass by a black pillar, on which a white hand with its finger pointing northward is situated. Its nails are stained red with blood, and in the game this statue is broken on the floor. In the book, this happens after the company leaves Isengard. They come close to the fortress itself. The tower was shaped of 4 piers of stone melded into one, protruding as great horns at the top of the tower. Around it is a great black ring of stone with only 1 entrance. The valley was once beautiful, but is now bare, paved with black stones and filled with bubbling water. There the company meets Merry and Pippin again, at the gate of Isengard, and they explain what has happened to them. The Ents went down into the valley, watched the army of Saruman leave, and the Huorns followed them. The Ents called for Saruman and smashed up the walls and the gate, like the great roots of trees crushing up great boulders into meal, while being attacked by the Uruk-hai. Saruman attacked with fire, and the Ent Beachbone was severely burned and died. This enraged the Ents, and they gathered as many streams as they could to completely flood Isengard. Merry and Pippin took refuge in a storeroom next to the gate, where, to their happiness, they found good food and pipeweed imported from the Shire, as we saw in the very first video I made on the Shire. The morning before the great lords arrived, Wormtongue came on his horse. Treebeard was instructed by Gandalf to send him to his master in the tower, and Grima reluctantly waded into the water and entered the tower. The final confrontation between Gandalf and Saruman is only shown in a cinematic, where one nice detail is that Saruman is seen wearing a cloak of many colors instead of a white one. This he made in the books in his ego, as he pretended to become the next Lord of Middle-earth and the greatest of wizards. His folly is exacerbated against the shining white coat of Gandalf, who breaks his staff after Grima throws down a palantir, which is shortly picked up by Pippin. And that would lead Gandalf ultimately to realize where the next major battle awaited. Thanks for watching this video. My memories of this expansion are a bit vague, so I was pretty surprised with the quality of the locations you visit. When making this video, I had not realized how much the story develops during this expansion, and really how little ground the characters cover in the Two Towers. We're not quite done with Rohan though. I will cover all the things outside of the beaten path in West Rohan in the next video. And then it's on to Gondor.